Hello, everyone. I'm just trying to get a couple of things to pop up here. We are going to start right on time, so we'll start right in about a minute. If you are out there, go ahead and put your name or put where you're from in the chat. I see we have some people here, some participants here. Sorry. I can see a little bit. I can see the chat, so feel free if you'd like to put in your name, where you're from. If you are a sports dietitian or a physical therapist or athletic trainer, a coach, an athlete, if you could put that in the chat, that would be great, just so we can know who we are talking to, and also maybe tailor it a little bit to that crowd. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Because we have some other webinars going on right after this one. So let's just go ahead and start. If you could, as we're going along, please, if you're just starting, go ahead and put your name, or you don't even have to put your name, but if you put where you're from and what you do, if you're an athlete, coach, athletic trainer, sports dietitian, et cetera, that would be super helpful. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started to talk about injury and recovery nutrition. All right, let's do it. I see there's some Q&A in the chat, but I can't pull all those things up right now. So or some Q&A. So if you could just throw that in the chat, that would be helpful since that part is actually up. Okay, so my name is Layla Al-Masri. I'm a sports dietitian. I've done a lot of different things, but I've been in this field for 20 years, probably over 20 years now. I've been head sports dietitian at the Naval Academy. I've authored a book. I've been a consultant for the Gatorade Sports Science Institute and the NBA G League. I do have a background in adolescent medicine and eating disorders. And I was a collegiate water polo player. So as a student athlete, I coached water polo, and then I've started again doing that as well. So I can kind of tackle this from a bunch of different angles. So what we learned tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the injury process, to review the stages of injury, why fueling after an injury is vital, and what foods aid in recovery from an injury. Again, if you're just joining, I see we have some more participants. If you could just go ahead and please, either put your name or put where you're from, and or what your occupation is, or if you're a student athlete or an athlete, or if you're put your occupation and that you're an athlete, that'd be great too. I see there's a Q&A, and if someone who wrote in that Q&A could go ahead and put that in the chat, it would be super helpful for me. So, someone just told me that the chat is disabled. Okay, I don't know why that is. I'm not actually. So why don't we then, okay, we're going to switch from the chat to just the Q&A. How about that? If you have something to say, go ahead and use the Q&A, and let's not use the chat. I'm not sure why that is. So it looks like people can use the Q&A. Why don't we go ahead and use that then? All right, thanks for letting me know. So let's go back to process of an injury here. So we've got two stages. So we're talking about if this is an injury that's severe enough to require mobilization. We've got the first stage, wound healing and recovery, begins immediately after the injury. And then, of course, the stages of wound recovery, inflammation, proliferation, remodeling, and the second stage would be that functional movement and return to play. So hope you can see that picture there, but tissue repair. So we're going to quickly go over this, and then we'll get into more of the nutrition pieces. But inflammation, so many processes are activated, resulting in healing, getting rid of those harmful microorganisms. It depends on the nature, right, of the injury and the severity of that injury. Not all injuries are the same. So then the second part, proliferation, right? The collagen matrix begins to form scar tissue, and then proliferation of the fibroblasts. So there's an increase in protein synthesis for rebuilding post-injury, growth of new capillaries, which leads to that kind of wound closure. Again, depending on what type of injury, will affect, this process here. So remodeling, scar tissue is formed as a result of the first two phases of healing. So key concerns in injury and immobilization. So athletes are going to be worried about muscle atrophy, reduced muscle protein synthesis, development of anabolic resistance, proteolysis, and then of course that loss of strength. And if any of you have ever been an athlete with, an injured athlete, or yourself maybe not have injured, but working with athletes are injured, these are kind of some very worrisome, kind of scary things, right? So what's the sports dietitian's job here? Is to assess the athlete. Once the injury occurs, they should be seen by a dietitian, a sports dietitian, fairly quickly. If this is something that they know is going to happen, so meaning they're going in for a surgery, I always like to have conversations with the athletes before. So if they're going for ACL surgery, or some other type of surgery where they know they're going to have some downtime, it's also always nice to kind of talk to the athlete prior to going into surgery and then following up with them immediately afterwards, but getting them ready for it. That's obviously not always going to be the case. So once an athlete, does get injured, making sure that you assess that athlete, as soon as possible. So what are we looking for? Nutrient deficiencies, energy balance, lipid balance, optimal hydration, and sleep habits. So these are all going to be important pieces to look for. And again, not just assessing them once, but continuing to assess them throughout that recovery process. So at the beginning, certain things may be, again, trying to follow up as much as you can. It depends what kind of environment you're in, where if you're at the collegiate level, sometimes it's a little bit easier to do the follow-up, but making sure that you've kind of assessed pretty regularly and using these kind of major points here. So what are the nutrition goals, right? We want to support muscle protein synthesis. We want to preserve that muscle mass. We want to maintain energy balance and prevent, excess body fat accumulation. Some of these things may be more important than others at certain parts of that recovery process. And again, what was the athlete like prior to the injury, or maybe prior to the surgery? What were some of the issues, or maybe there weren't issues, or what was the body composition? So a lot of those things are going to play into what these goals are and how you're going to, recommend the athlete move forward. So let's talk a little bit about energy, right? Main goal of nutrition post-injury is to prevent deficiencies. Most athletes will want to reduce their calorie intake. That's the first thing they want to do is, hey, you know what? I'm not going to eat. I'm not working out as much. I don't want to eat as much. Some of them, this is really very hard for them to not exercise. So they try to reduce their calorie intake pretty drastically. We need to always remind athletes that you need to have enough fuel to heal. And of course, that rehabilitation is also going to be a big determining factor for energy expenditure on top of the energy that the body needs to heal. So again, not focusing on calories, but focusing on, hey, athlete, what's going on? Trying to make sure that they're still getting enough fuel in their system, trying to make sure that they're not going hungry, trying to make sure that they're eating well throughout the day, giving them some goals to kind of maintain versus letting them focus on, calorie and numbers. All right, so protein needs are going to be high. All right, especially post, at the beginning, those protein needs are going to go up. Really depends on that phase of injury, but anywhere from 1.6 to 2.5 grams per kilogram per day. Again, this doesn't mean all that much to the athlete, but to the healthcare team, to the sports dietitian, providing some information, giving that information, saying, hey, these are the things that you can have, these are the things that you should eat, and this is how to kind of break it down. That's what we're looking for. So in that protein, we're also trying to optimize by having the athlete consume more leucine in the diet. Leucine is a branched chain amino acid. It's also been often known sometimes as an anabolic trigger. So, consuming more leucine in the diet, trying to get more leucine rich foods is also going to be very helpful. So really what we're trying to do is not overload the athlete with protein at any one point of the day. The goal really is to break it up, right? Distribute it evenly throughout the day, 20 to 40 grams of protein every 3 to 4 hours. So now the athlete's eating 5 or 6 times a day. And then, of course, they've got that protein to help continue to build and repair throughout the day. Again, how much is going to vary depending on athlete injury and where they are in that phase of injury. So things like what are we talking about here when we're talking about leucine? So things like whey protein, maybe kind of cheddar cheese, lean meats, great sources, and slowly digested proteins prior to sleep, right? We want to have things that are going to digest, quicker during the day, prior to sleep. We want more of that casein. So some of that low fat cottage cheese, maybe some low fat Greek yogurt. Those will all be great things. Also will help trigger some sleep. All right, so carbohydrates, another key source of energy during rehab. Again, we need this. The athletes need this for fuel, right? We want to use the protein for healing and repairing. We want to use the carbohydrates as that energy source. We want to use that carbohydrates for them to be able to do their rehab and to maintain all the other things that the body is doing, carrying out all the other processes using those carbohydrates. So again, recommendation, minimum maybe 3 to 5 grams per kilogram body weight per day. And these numbers are important only to you as the dietitian or the healthcare provider, but again, not meaning that much to the athlete. So providing them with some ideas of what are the things that they can include into their diet, and including some more of the whole grains, fruits, vegetables. Sometimes when they're on the pain medication, we want to make sure they're drinking enough fluids and having enough whole grains and fiber to make sure that they don't get constipated. So fats, again, critical. Some also might be something that athletes try to steer away from, just because they're worried about gaining weight during this process where they're not as active. So again, fat is a critical source, so reminding them they need that energy for healing, recovery, and decreasing inflammation. So giving them ideas of saying, hey, let's eat more of the anti-inflammatory fats, like the olive oil, avocados, the fish oil or the fatty fish, flaxseed, nuts, walnuts, almonds, and trying to stay away from some or more of the higher saturated fats and oils. But I think, really focusing more on the anti-inflammatory fats will really help them maintain not only their fat intake, but also their energy intake. So some more vitamins and minerals to support recovery. We want to make sure that we're looking more at vitamin C, A, D, calcium, magnesium, zinc, copper, putting all these pieces again to it. And I think a good idea is just to kind of give, an athlete ideas. Instead of saying eat more vitamin C, let's get them some ideas like, hey, let's have some more, fruits and veggies. And these are where we can kind of put these pieces in as we go along. I think someone raised their hand, but honestly, I can't see that anymore. So if you could just put it into the Q&A, that would be fantastic. Because the chat, for those of you that see some people kind of joined a little bit further into the presentation, unfortunately the chat is disabled and I don't really know why. So if you could just kind of put things into the Q&A, I would be very appreciative of that. All right, so considerations to speed recovery from an injury. So there are foods, there are supplements. Foods, of course, first, we're looking at omega-3 fatty acids, the branched chain amino acids, what we talked about earlier, leucine, casein, again, important. That is, again, something that's going to be slow digesting. So having that before before bed, as a snack before bed, is a much better time to have that. Tart cherry juice definitely shows some benefits anti-inflammatory and antioxidant support. Usually we say about maybe like 1.5 to 2 to 3 glasses, which does seem like a lot, but also could be something to include. And then gelatin or gelatin-based foods may help collagen synthesis. So supplement-wise, again, always important for the athlete to make sure that they're talking with the healthcare team and or sports dietitian before supplementation. There have been some studies on creatine and of course fish oil. But again, those things you need to talk with the healthcare team and or healthcare provider and or sports dietitian before supplementation. So alcohol, again, depending on the population that you're working with, we want to make sure that we're trying to teach the athlete some good habits during this time, but again, touching on the alcohol to try to avoid it during recovery. It's going to impair wound healing, potentially increase muscle loss. And then of course, depending on where that athlete is, body-wise, body fat-wise, may, lead to some extra weight gain and maybe some body composition changes that the athlete is not looking to have. So this is where I'm definitely going to need some help from the audience here. I'm going to see. Can someone test the chat for me and see if that's working now? I'm going to test it out with you because I would like see if that works for everyone. I think maybe I may have been able to fix it, but if you can, hopefully, we want to go through this case study, and if you guys could kind of chit chat here and throw some of your ideas in, that would be great. But it seems like, nope. All right, I'm sorry. Thank you to Kelsey and Stephanie who keep telling me that it's not working. I don't really know. Unfortunately, this is not my Zoom. This is not actually my Zoom. So it's on a different Zoom. So I have no idea. I thought I was able to disable it, but I guess I haven't. So if you could just go ahead and kind of throw your answers in the Q&A. And again, I'm really sorry about that. That would be great. So let's just talk about this case study one. Jack, a 17-year-old male varsity cross country athlete, has been diagnosed with hamstring strain and is unable to practice for 4 weeks. His protein intake, 1.2 grams per kilogram per day. He rarely eats fruits and vegetables. What are some dietary improvements Jack could make to help his recovery? All right. Sorry, I see more people telling me the chat is disabled, and I'm again super sorry about that. If you could just write in the Q&A, that would be very, very much appreciated. So, yep. So definitely increasing protein, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and spread protein throughout the day. I can't emphasize this enough. It is so very important when these athletes get when these athletes are injured or they know they're going to go in and have a surgery, that they're really prepared well to understand that they need to make sure that they're not just eating protein, that they need to make sure that they're eating enough calories, enough energy, enough fuel, and that they're making sure that they're still balancing and not limiting the amount of energy overall. So really kind of sitting down with them and making sure that they are having something to eat every 3 to 4 hours, and that they are getting the right types of foods in, and just giving them a whole bunch of ideas and preparing, or making sure that someone is actually bringing them meals if they can't move that much, or they can't get to the grocery store, or whatever reasons it is. But I think everyone has some good ideas. Add good casein or yogurt before bed, a lot of fruits and vegetables, bump up the protein a little bit. Again, add 1 to 2 servings of protein and some fruit, maybe a protein fruit smoothie. Sorry, yeah, my cat is behind me, poking me. So all great answers. And I think we probably see this a lot, especially in some of the collegiate athletes who don't necessarily have a great food plan and or have a like going to the grocery store that much. So all right, let's go to case study 2. So Emily, a 21-year-old female collegiate soccer player, has been experiencing chronic pain around her knee. Her athletic trainer has diagnosed it as tendonitis. Just a little bit about Emily. She's a vegetarian. She's having a hard time finding meals in the cafeteria. In addition, now that she's 21, she's enjoying more drinks with her friends and often stays up late finishing her homework. So probably sounds quite familiar. Again, not something that's really abnormal. So how do Emily's late nights play a role in her recovery? Any thoughts as to that? Right, the alcohol intake is definitely going to affect her sleep, in addition to staying up late affecting her sleep. And we've kind of got this cycle that is not helping her recover. So whether it's the injury or whether it was prior to the injury, as we always want to make sure that we're telling athletes bad habits eventually catch up with you. You feel like you can, I can do this, it's fine, until all of a sudden your body breaks. And so then trying to kind of step back and say, hey, what are some of the things that I need to fix? But sleep is definitely going to be one of them. And then, of course, the quality and quantity of sleep is going to be super important as well. I think we just kind of talked about it a little bit with the alcohol influencing, recovery. It's going to affect the sleep. It's going to slow down recovery. I think I just told, I think it was, alcohols can still have some effects in your system, I think up to 72 hours post drink. So again, it can still cause some balance issues. It can cause you to, again, a lot of the different things that are going to be helping you, such as your balance, your recovery, just all the different things that are going to play into your actual sports, of the day, the practice, the game. Those detrimental effects of that alcohol can last up to 72 hours in your system. So really trying to educate athletes on the fact that it doesn't just clear out here in a few seconds. And just because you feel okay doesn't mean that some of those negative effects aren't still going to get you. So what nutrition education can Emily benefit from besides the sleep and talking about alcohol? Again, as a vegetarian, it depends what kind of vegetarian she is. So we're trying to encourage that dairy, that cottage cheese, that yogurt, maybe a protein shake, maybe also balancing, trying to get some groceries, balance what's in the cafeteria and balancing that with what can she get on the outside. Again, I like this one, of course, including some of those anti-inflammatory fats. So all great answers. And again, depending on what you're going to tell this athlete is really going to depend on what they're going to want to hear. A lot of these athletes come in, there's so many different issues going on, but trying to tackle the ones that are easiest first. All right, trying to make it easy for them so they don't get turned off. Again, just kind of some action steps and review. RD should evaluate dietary intake of the athlete to determine part of overall nutrition status. Again, if you can meet with an athlete prior to some sort of injury, recovery, surgery, that's great. Obviously, that's only a very small portion. So trying to evaluate that athlete as soon as you can post-injury is going to be really important. Of course, we always want to recommend that food first approach. But sometimes, depending on the situation, depending on where they are, depending on what kind of setting it's a collegiate setting, it might be easier if they're at home. There's a lot of different factors that are going to play into it. Obviously, we want them to approach it with food first, but these athletes really need to be watched to make sure that they are ready. They have the ability to get the food. It's easy to get, and then it's actually easy to get. To consume. So again, supplements can be used. Again, something to discuss with a healthcare provider and or sports dietitian first, though. I don't think it's a good idea for anyone to start just taking supplements. And of course, those under 18, we don't have a lot of research on these as either. So we want to really make sure, again, discuss with a healthcare provider or sports dietitian, really important. So, many of you probably know that my sports dietitian offers a one-on-one sports nutrition coaching. You can get 2 weeks free. So again, really helpful for athletes. A personalized plan is definitely what every athlete is going to need. Here are a few references from this presentation. And of course, there's also some really great, here are some references, but there's also some really great information on, maybe the SCAN website, the SCAN DPG, CPSDA, GSSI. They're all some really great websites to go to if you're looking for a little bit more information on injury. If you have a lot of athletes with a certain type of injury, you can see more information, on those sites. And again, QR code if you'd like to find a little bit more. And that is it for the evening. Again, sorry that we've kind of gone through a little bit quickly, but there is another presentation soon, so I have to cut this one off. Here, if you guys have any more questions, though, please just send an email to my sports dietitian. I'm trying to see if I can find that here. mysportsd.com. If you go on there, there's a place where you can send in some questions if you have more questions. But please, if you do, let us know. And again, thanks for coming this evening.